You might have heard a little bit about electric cars that share a platform. Now, all that means is that they share some of the bits underneath that you don't see, so things like motors, batteries, and the chassis. Now, manufacturers do that so they can offer more choice and cut costs, so they make more money. Take these two, for example. They are basically non-identical twins, both built by the VW group. Now this, on the one hand, is a Volkswagen ID.3 58 kWh Pro Performance. It starts at £35,835 and it comes with a 58 kWh battery, just over 200 brake horsepower and just under 250 miles of WLTP range. On the other hand, this is a Cupra Born. Now this also comes with a 58 kWh battery, just over 200 brake horsepower and just under 250 miles of WLTP range. And that's because these are exactly the same car wearing different hats. So our question today is, quite obviously, which twin is best? Although, just for your information, that is not a question you should ask of human siblings. But before we get to the proper family feud, please do let us know in the comments which one you would prefer. A proper, old school VW branded car, or the new, slightly upstartish Cupra. Now you'll notice, because you have eyes, that these two cars are very similar. They've got short overhangs, the general arc of the car is exactly the same, the shape of the windows, the big thick C-pillar, and both of these have got rear-mounted motors, and that's why they've got short noses. They are a song sung from the same hymn book. The thing is, there are quite a lot of differences, especially when you start to look closer. The ID.3 is more friendly and open-faced from the front, where the Born is a bit more aggressive and sporty looking. And then you kind of look and the ID.3 looks more simple in its exterior detailing, whereas the Born, it's got more jewellery, more jingle-jangle. But then you get to the back of the C-pillar on the ID.3 and you see these. And guess what? They're stickers. But on the Born, they're actually 3D and pressed into the plastic. Now, I happen to prefer the way the Cupra Born looks because I think it's a bit more sporty and a bit more aggressive looking, but I can also see how the simplicity and the friendliness of the ID.3 might also appeal. It's also worth noting that both of these cars, apart from the shape of the wheels and some badging, look pretty much the same no matter what spec you have them. It's kind of like no matter how much you spend, they always look the way they do.
And inside, they have the same things in the same places in largely the same specification. So there's a central screen here with an extra information display in front of the driver, the same places for the air vents, the same controls for the lights and electric mirrors, and the rocker gear selector here on the side of the binnacle. There's the same centre console arrangement, although slightly different shapes, but the Cupra does feel a little bit darker than the lighter coloured VW.
But the Cupra seems to have nicer seats, nicer touch points, and the tech seems that little bit more responsive than in the ID.3. It's quite subjective, I know, but where the ID.3 can feel playful, but a little bit cheap, the Cupra is a little bit more serious, but also just that little bit more solid, which is the complete opposite that I thought it would be given the price. Also, you do seem to get a little bit more kit for your money in the Cupra than you do the ID.3, because all Cupra Borns come with a 12-inch screen as standard, whereas in the ID.3 you make do with a measly 10 inches. Also on the base model of the ID.3, you'll get steel wheels and rear parking sensors, whereas in the base model of the Born, you get 18-inch alloys and also a rear view camera. So it's that sort of thing. Obviously, you'll have to go through the exact equipment on the car that you're interested in to work out what works for you, but generally it does seem you get a little bit more for your money with the Cupra Born. Although there are no standard heated seats on the base model Born. Boo. So, are these cars similar in terms of, I don't know, front seat space? Yes. Yes. Good. But how about rear seat space? Yes. But the Born seems to have a slightly flatter seat base than the ID.3, so it's slightly less comfortable for taller people. Fine. But how about boot space? Folding ability? Well, yes, they're exactly the same, so it's 60/40 for each one with an optional ski hatch. And as for the boot, again, they are exactly the same at 385 litres. But you know what? The Cupra just has the edge on quality over the ID.3. It might only be literally skin deep, but the Born has nicer finishes and the tech is slightly more responsive.
And you've probably guessed this already, but both have the same charging abilities. And because they have the same battery, all the figures are the same for these two. But both are available with smaller and bigger batteries according to your need and budget, the 58 kWh being the middle one. So, just under 250 miles of impossible range on the WLTP cycle for these 58s. 11 kW AC charging, 130 kW DC fast charging, meaning 30 minutes 10 to 80% on a big enough charger. There's just over an hour on a more common 50 kW charger, or 9 hours and 15 minutes on a home wall box, flat to full. And yeah, if you're geeky like me, you'll be interested in their average charge rate rather than the peak figure. And both of these will charge at an average of 85 kilowatts, so fair but not stunning. The charging point is unsurprisingly in the same position. And in our tests, we've been getting roughly 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour for each car, so largely the same. So here's where it gets interesting. Drive the ID.3 in isolation and it is perfectly good. Acceleration is smooth and nippy, the view is nicely panoramic, although both cars do suffer from a big blind spot at the back, and the steering is accurate and well weighted. It's got good turning circle too.
The ID.3 also just doesn't feel very big. It's roughly the same size as a Golf and it is supremely easy to use. You just set yourself up and then you use this little rotary controller on the side of the binnacle, you rock it forward for drive and backwards for reverse, and then it's just stop and go. It's even got a little play and pause symbol on the accelerator and the brake respectively in case you needed reminding. Although if you do need reminding every time you get into a car which pedal does which, you probably shouldn't be driving in the first place. Click the gear lever back into B mode, which is like 1 past D, so you rock it forwards again, and you get a mildly strong brake regeneration effect. It's not quite a one pedal car, and for me it could do with a little bit more aggression. And in fact that's the same on both cars. I would like a stronger brake regen. It's a bit of a could do better moment for both of them. And you know what, it rides really nicely, it's nice and quiet. It actually rides better than a car with an internal combustion engine. And a lot of electric cars do, because the battery is quite heavy and it's held very low and in the centre of the car. It gives the suspension a very solid place to push from. Also, that means the handling is usually very safe and secure with an electric car. And the ID.3 is no different, it's actually very good.
The problem for the ID.3 is that the Born has been tweaked to make it just that little bit sportier. The ride height is slightly lower, the tyres are a smidge wider and the steering is therefore sharper. You can also option an e-boost button on the steering wheel that gives you an extra kick of power for a limited time on the Born, something you can't get on any ID.3. It also has a sportier ESP Sport mode which makes it more obviously rear-wheel drive.
Now that, you would think, would make the Born ride a lot more harshly than the ID.3, but it really doesn't. It's slightly firmer, yes, I would say that, but not in a way that spoils it. So it's just that little bit more fun to drive more of the time. It's a little bit more engaging in pretty much every situation. It's not actually any faster according to the stats, it just feels like it. In fact, it's got exactly the same 0 to 62 time and top speed, but you'll have more of a laugh driving a Cupra Born than you will a Volkswagen ID.3. Oh, and I know it's a small point, but both of these cars have these sets of haptic buttons on the steering wheel, and when I'm holding the steering wheel with my thumbs in this position, sometimes when I turn a corner, they're terribly inconsistent. So I'll turn a corner and I accidentally switch things on and off, and then when I try and switch things on and off, they don't always work. It's really annoying. Well, either that or I've just got really heavy thumbs. And the other thing I really hate is that the window switches for both front and rear are operated from 2 switches on this door panel here. So you've got a little button in front that you have to press before you can use the same switches to lower the back windows. It doesn't bother me often, but window switches were not a thing that needed fixing. Do you know what? This feels like really smart work from Cupra. It feels like they let Volkswagen launch the ID.3 first and then looked at all the feedback and the criticism and then tweaked the Born to be just that little bit better. It's got slightly sweeter tech, you get a little bit more for your money even though it's cheaper to buy, and it drives with a tiny bit more commitment even though it doesn't sacrifice ride comfort. In fact, the only completely subjective thing is really the looks, and I'll leave that up to you. And I do think that Volkswagen will probably improve the ID.3 over time, but at this point, the Cupra Born is definitely the better car. Crikey, did we just give proper consumer advice?
Do you agree? Would you rather have the ID.3 or the Born? Let us know in the comments. And if you need help figuring out which car is the best version for you, please do log on to electrifying.com, where you can find our review videos on both of these cars, and we'll do our best to help, including letting you know what kind of waiting times you might be looking at. At the moment, the Volkswagen is looking at between 12 and 18 months, but you should be able to get a Cupra a lot quicker because they've stopped making the ID.3 in favour of the Born.